Okay, today we're going to be drawing a realistic eye. Now, practice makes perfect, and a lot of the tricks to this are basically layering, but most of it is really very simple shapes. And I'll show you right now. The first thing that you want to do is you want to start off with your supplies. So you have a pencil with an eraser. I have a kneaded eraser also that I can use. I also have a thing called a tortillon. Now the tortillon is basically a blender, and you can buy them for super cheap at different craft stores around. But they come in all sorts of different sizes, so you can use a thinner one or a thicker one. Like this is a thicker one, but and we'll talk a little bit more about tools later. But basically that's all the tools that you need for this project. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to set my eraser and my tortillon on the side because we'll use those later. Now, with our drawing, okay, you're going to start off with a circle. So on our paper, you're going to take about approximately in the center of the paper and draw a circle. I usually try to do a couple of rounds because that gives me a little bit more of an accurate circle because it's a free form. So I'm not really going to use like a compass or anything because then that looks really robotic and I don't want that. I want this to be realistic. So I'm going to start off here. This is going to be the iris of our eye. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take and kind of eyeball where half of your eye is. That's where the corners of the eyes are going to be on the sides. But what I want to do is I want to make myself a flattened rainbow is what I call it. So I'm going to take and I'm going to cut off about the top part here of my circle with a line. And then I'm going to bring that line down into an arc to about halfway where my eye was, where I thought about that halfway point on my eyeball. The next thing on the other side is you're going to do the same thing. So make your flattened rainbow to about halfway to the halfway point. Okay? So you should get something that looks like this. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take those two corners and you're going to make a smile underneath this circle. So I'm going to start here and come up to the corner of my eye. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, and don't worry about the extra lines because we're going to erase those. That's what we have our eraser for. Now, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to start erasing those lines. So I can take my regular eraser and I can use that for the bulk things. And this is where you can also start shaping your eye. Okay. I'm going to take out all of these extra lines that I don't like that make it look messy. And then I'm going to come back over with the main lines or the contour lines. Get that somewhat cleaned up there, okay? So the next thing that you're going to do is that our eyes have a middle section that is open to light, and that is called a pupil. Now the light actually goes into the pupil of our eye, and it's funny because the eye works in a very interesting way with the brain, is that when the image comes into your eye, it is upside down in your eye, but your brain turns it right side up. So I always thought that was a very fascinating fact. And it also shows how wonderfully and beautifully our bodies are made and how we adapt. So the next thing is we're going to draw a pupil in the center of the eye, and again kind of do a couple circles so it kind of gives me a little bit more of an accurate circle. And then I'm going to fill in that eye because the pupil is basically just a hole that the light comes in, and that's where the images go into and the light goes into so it can be transformed and shown by our brain. And that's how we see those things. So now you should have something like this. Super simple shapes, super simple drawing so far, okay? Yes, it looks very basic and it looks very contourish and cartoon-like, also coloring book-like, but that's okay because we are going to get there. Most of this is going to be basically like layering, shadowing, shading, and that's what's going to give us our realism. Now the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to pick, because see, my eye is pretty much symmetrical right here, so I could really do either side to put my tear duct on. I'm going to go ahead and put my tear duct on the right hand side. And so what that is that I'm going to do a little bit of a U shape. So it's going to come down around and make kind of a U shape and angle off into the eye. So now I'm going to erase that middle section because we don't have a line in our eye. It's pretty open into our tear duct. Now the tear duct is not a duck, quack quack, it's a duct, D-U-C-T. So it's kind of like the air ducts in our house that pushes air through our home. Well, the tear duct actually pushes tears through to our eyes, and that's what keeps our eyes moist and also makes us, that's where we cry from. And so that is what these are for, okay? So the next thing is that we are going to start adding the lines of our iris. Now, when we have an iris, and I'm going to show you my sample one more time, okay, just so you can kind of see an idea. With the lines of the iris, the outside edge of the iris is going to be darker than the rest of the eye. The same thing is going to happen with the pupil. It's going to be darker around the pupil. But in between that is going to be some lighter sections. And that's where we're going to be using our eraser and our shadow and our shading and stuff. But you'll see here, as we start layering, we're going to start off with the darker lines coming from the side or from the outside of the iris in towards the pupil. So it's going to be kind of like the spokes on a bicycle wheel, is that you're going to start with your lines and just do a bunch of little lines here. And notice how all my little lines are going to go towards, they're going to point towards the center of the pupil. And that's exactly what we want. So like I said, spokes on a bicycle wheel. Everything goes towards the center. The good thing too about paper is that it is mobile. You can turn it as you work. It doesn't have to stay in the same way. You can keep it. It doesn't have to stay in the same place. You can turn it. You can flip it. You can do whatever you need to get your art done. Now notice that my lines don't all have to be the same length either. If you notice in the iris, you'll see that there's a bunch of little lines in different colors. Our irises are not all the same color. Sometimes people with brown eyes will have like a golden color also in it. Some will have greenish in it. Blue eyes sometimes have like a navy blue or purple, and sometimes even some brown in there. So eyes are not all just one solid color like we would see like on a cartoon. They have various different colors, and that again is what makes our eye look realistic. All right, so now we have our outside edge that's darkened. Still looks very cartoonish, but we're getting there, okay? Don't discount this, okay? Not yet. Now, the next thing you're going to do is the same thing with the pupil. On the outside edge of the pupil here, you're going to go ahead and draw those same little lines around the pupil. So again, it's going to be darker, and everything is going to point towards the center of the pupil. These little lines are what will make the biggest difference in making this eye look realistic. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our tortillon. Okay, now our tortillon again is a blender. You can make these and wrap up paper. You can use a Kleenex. You can go ahead and take a Kleenex and use that and smudge, but I think it's more accurate when you use a tortillon. You can also take a triangle of paper, roll up the big side, and tape that in the middle, and that can make you a tortillon also. And we'll talk more about that and maybe do a video on that later. But I take my tortillon. Right now I'm using a number 6, and again, you can pick these up at any craft store and like maybe a couple bucks, okay? And they really are worth it. So what you're going to do is you're going to take and you're going to do in the same direction that you drew your lines. You notice how I've got some smudges in there, okay? And as I'm pushing, and I use my tortillon just like I would with my pencil, I push down like I would my pencil, and I just start going in the same direction that I drew those lines. And what that does is that softens up those lines, and it makes it look not so so rigid, okay? Because we don't want like rigid lines in there. We want some smudgy lines. We'll see a little bit of the lines in there. Again, that's what gives it our realism. And we're going to be working this iris in layers because again, this is what is going to give us that 3D effect and make it look like it's a real eye. Okay, so already you can tell a huge difference just by smudging those lines together. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the pupil, and I'm going to go ahead and smudge those lines from the pupil out and kind of meet that smudge in the middle that I did from the outside of the edge of the iris. And right now it just looks like one big smudge in the middle, but we're going to be adding or picking up some of that graphite in the middle to make it look like some highlights in there. Okay. All right. So now we're here at this point, okay? Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start and I'm going to come back over. Remember I was telling you about layering, okay? When we layer, again, it starts overlapping some of these lines. So again, they're not so definite and they actually will kind of work together when you start layering these things. So I'm going to do kind of the same thing and add another layer of outside lines onto the edge of my iris. Already we're starting to get that 3D effect more so than what we had before. And also the cool thing is these little lines cover up our drawing lines that we did. Okay, same thing again around the pupil. Part of the trick again is layering. We got to make sure we get that layering in there. Okay, and the iris, the pupil, we can always come back in and darken and do what we need to do there. Okay, so if you feel like it's getting too light because you accidentally put your tortillon over there and started smudging more out of it, that's all right. You can always keep adding more graphite to it. Okay, so same thing, take our tortillon and start to smudge those edges again. And same thing around the pupil. Start smudging those lines again. And remember, go in the direction of the lines that you already have on there. So you want to go from the edge of the pupil out and from the edge of the iris in. Okay, so make sure that you keep that in that same direction. All right, so now we kind of have already some highlights in there. If you've noticed that I'm not smudging the whole thing and putting everything together. Now, couple things you can do. If you have a kneaded eraser, you can use a kneaded eraser. The really nice thing about the kneaded erasers is that, and again, you can get these for like 97 cents at Hobby Lobby, okay? But these things, as you stretch them, okay, when you get graphite on them, you can clean it by stretching them and pulling them and kind of folding it over and kneading it. That's why it's called a kneaded eraser. And so you keep kneading it, and guess what? Look how clean that eraser is now. Okay, you can also shape it. So if I want really thin shapes, I can or really thin parts that I want to erase, I can shape my eraser to fit where I need to erase. So that's the beauty of a kneaded eraser. Now, it's a super simple, super cheap tool, very helpful if you need it, just like a tortillon. And sometimes we just have the pencil with an eraser, and that's okay too, okay? Either one works. It's just that some things make our jobs a little easier, and that's what the tortillon and the kneaded eraser does, okay? So I'm going to start off though with using the eraser on my pencil. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just pick up some little lines. Again, going in the same directions from the outside of the pupil to the outside edge of the iris, and just very lightly pick up some of these lines, okay? And you notice I'm not doing any major lines, just little lines in between here and there, okay? Okay. Now again, I can do the same thing with my kneaded eraser, and I'll show you that. And I can just kind of pick up. See, I put like a real thin line, and I'm going to pick up where I need to pick up on my eye with that graphite. Okay, so you can see now already it's starting to look more realistic. All right, and we'll keep playing with that here in just a second. As we keep working, we'll adjust as we go. Now, the next thing that you're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go outside the edge of my my iris, because again, the iris outline is usually darker than the inside of the eye. Same thing with the edge of the pupil. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to come back and outline my iris and make it darker. This is going to add more depth and give it more of a look of realism also. Okay, so now you can already see that depth just by adding a darker line right there, okay? I am going to take my tortillon and just smudge it in a little bit along that edge. Not a lot. I'm just going to very lightly so it doesn't look like it's a cartoon line or like a coloring book line. And I'm just going to blend that line into the edge of the lines of my iris, okay? Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add our waterline, which is down here on the bottom of our eye, and then the ridge on the top of our eye that holds our eyelashes. Each of those ridges holds them. The waterline is kind of where the tears come over. That's why they kind of call it the waterline here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn my paper, and I'm going to draw just an outline, just a thin outline along the bottom of the eye. okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing on the top. So I'm going to outline the edge of the top, kind of come across that iris there, and then down to the other side, okay? So now I've got this edge that's going to hold my eyelashes, okay? Now, same thing. I can take my kneaded eraser or regular eraser, and I'm going to take and I'm going to erase those extra lines that I don't want, and I can always come back in with my pencil. I might have to do that first. Okay. Get rid of some of those extra lines there. And don't worry if you erase an extra line, you can always come back over. Okay. All right. So now we've got our complete eye along with our ridges, okay? So the next thing is we're going to add some more depth, okay? So we're going to go ahead and start adding some darker lines along the edges of, like right above our water lines there, okay? So we're going to come down, make that a little darker because again, that edge goes into the eye, and so it has shadow in there, okay? So same thing here. I'm not going to go all the way across. I'm just going to kind of go from the edge, darken those lines just a tad bit. Okay. And then the same thing with the upper part. Now the upper part, usually your light's going to be coming from the top or from the sides, okay? And so at least that's what we're going to do, okay? And so basically if we have light coming from any of these sides, okay, you're going to have these shadows. So here underneath these ridges, you're going to get those shadows in there. So we're going to darken that line all the way across the top of the eye. Just the inside line though, okay? Let's see, add some dark lines here. Add some depth in there, okay? So that's looking pretty good so far, but we still have more to go, okay? So the next thing is we are going to add the eyelid. And so the eyelid is going to start from about here, from about the tear duct, and it's just another almost outline, but a little thicker of an outline, okay? It's just going to be dependent on, now if you're working actually with a person, you're going to have to adjust this to the person that you're working with, because some people have thinner eyelids and some people have thicker, and it's just going to depend on what you see in that person, okay? So here I'm going to add some extra lines here. All right. Now I'm going to take my tortillon, my handy dandy tortillon, and I'm going to take and I'm going to start adding some shadows, okay? I've got my deep lines, and I can always come back later if I need to make them deeper, but I'm going to start off with smudging the lines on the eyelid, and see how I'm following that same line that I just drew, and look at that, how that gives that kind of soft skin look. That's what you want, because our skin, I mean, yes, we have wrinkles and things, but our skin doesn't have like these sharp, harsh lines usually. So it's gonna kind of fade into the lighter parts of our skin. And so that's what we're doing here, is you're gonna go ahead and smudge those lines to make them softer like skin, okay? The next thing you're gonna do is you're going to smudge right along in here on the ridge of your eye. And again, you can use your fingers for this too. You don't have to have any special tools. Okay, we're going to smudge that line. And then smudge the top. Okay. And it's okay to go over a little bit because we can always erase. And sometimes you'll find out that it actually gives it more realism when you start smudging a little bit more. The good thing about working with the Tortillon is that you can already like do soft, super soft shadows by using like what I call a dirty Tortillon, because it's already got the graphite on it. And so you don't have to do any pencil shading. You can just use your Tortillon with the graphite already on it and start smudging, as you've seen I've done with this eyelid. Okay, so that makes it kind of cool because then you don't have to worry about these harsh lines. Okay, so check that out. So far so good. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to keep working it till we're happy with it. Okay, and so I think on the outside I'm happy with, but with the white of our eye, we have like these corners and things that are not usually just a solid white like this whenever we have the light shining. So again, we're going to kind of have the light shining in this direction. So I'm going to take my dirty Tortillon and I'm just going to do very light shadow. Okay, now remember, so when we are working with the eye still, okay, where the light is shining, you're going to have some places that just naturally have a darker line or an outline. So on this eye, what you're going to do is you're going to start again with your ridges. They're going to naturally be darker just because they kind of fold in along with the skin, and then you have these areas here that are, like I said, are just going to naturally be darker. So we're going to darken those lines. You can again always go back into the pupil and darken that, because that is going to be just a black hole basically, and so we want that to kind of stand out from the iris. Now the next thing is that you're going to take and you're going to shadow and shade using your Tortillon or your finger or whatever it is that you're using to shade. And I'm going to go ahead and, using my dirty Tortillon, I'm going to go ahead and smooth out those darker lines, but that's also going to deposit some graphite onto the tip of my Tortillon. So now I can go ahead and start shadowing using that. So I'm going to take the corner of the eye here, as you can see, and I'm following along the shape of the eye because it's kind of a rounded, almost like a ball. Well, we call it an eyeball, okay? So it is more spherical shaped. And you're going to shadow that corner because, again, this part of the eye and the inside of the eye curve in, and so that's where you're going to be adding some more shadowing. The other thing is you're going to come over to the other side and do the same thing. The tear ducts also are going to be shadowed, okay? And then you're going to shadow right along the ridge or the edge of the eye. Again, kind of curve some of that. Use your Tortillon to use that curve there. And so now that gives you more realism just by adding the little bits of graphite into the white of the eye. Now, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do some really light lines, very light lines, into my iris, again going from the center of the pupil out to the edge of the iris. Okay, and again, if you feel like those lines are too harsh, bring in your Tortillon and just kind of soften some of those lines in there. Get those blended together. Again, if you feel like there's too much, again, here comes the layering thing, okay? You're going to take your eraser, again, whether it's either on a pencil or on your kneaded eraser, either one. Then you're going to take and pick up little sections of graphite, and not like big sections. You're not erasing the whole thing. You're just erasing little parts to give it more depth. Okay? So now here's where we're going to use a bigger eraser, or one like this, because you're going to be using the little shine mark that's on the eye. So I'm going to take just a square or a little rectangle and erase part of that. So now that gives me that little shine mark there, okay? Now, or that reflection mark. Now the next thing is that we're going to look at doing the eyelashes. Now with the eyelashes, they're a little different. You want to take pieces of, or parts of lines. So here I'm going to change over to this paper here, and I'm going to show you how I do my eyelashes. And so what I do is, let's say I have a ridge here. I'm going to take my pencil and put it on the paper and flick, okay? And I can flick it into little bundles of hair or eyelashes. And some of those eyelashes you want to crisscross, because when you look at our eyelashes don't just go straight up like they would in a coloring book or cartoon character. They actually crisscross like little hairs. So I give it a little curve in there also. And if you want to practice this is a good way to practice it. Just practice it first. You should end up with a thicker line at the base and a thinner line at the top. Now you're going to do the same thing with the bottom part, and you're going to take and just do little flicks. Now if you find that you did something too big like that, then you can erase and then just go back and start doing your little hairs and flicking. And flick that pencil and crisscross those hairs, okay? So I'm going to come back over here into my drawing, since I got my eyelashes practiced. Usually they're going to be a little thicker along the outside corner, and then they get a little thinner as they come to the inside edge. And so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to do just a couple of flicks with my pencil up to about the crease of the eyelid, and just keep going. And I'm curving those lines as I'm going. Oop, too big. Okay. And again, they don't have to all be the same size, because some eyelashes are longer, some aren't. And just keep going. I'm just doing little bundles of 2 and 3. And then, like I said, I'm crisscrossing those eyelashes. And as I get to the top, the eyelashes will look like they're going a little bit more straight. And so as I come over to the inside, they curve in this way from the outside. They're going to start to curve in this way, on the opposite way, on the inside, okay? Because you've got that natural curve of the eye, and so that's how our eyelashes are too. And they're going to get a little thinner as I get, and a little shorter as I get closer to the edge, the inside edge of the eye. Okay, now another thing too, and I kind of discovered this myself too just recently, is that when you do your eyelashes, you also kind of want to put some little curves on the bottom part of the ridge of the eyelash, because of where the eyelashes are. And you'll notice even on our eyes, you'll see that the eyelashes, when you're looking straight on in the mirror, our eyelashes kind of do dip down into what looks like the eye. I know it's not in the eye, but it looks like it comes down into the eye. Okay. Just a little eyelash here and there to kind of give it that more natural look. Okay. The next thing is you have this reflection. I'm just going to do a few little lines, just super light lines, to kind of make it look like the eyelashes are reflecting in that. Okay. Now, actually that may be a little bit too much, so I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and just dab at that. So it looks like I've got a little bit in there. All right, so now we're going to do the bottom lashes. Now the bottom lashes are going to be shorter, okay? So we want to make sure that we don't go as long as what the top lashes are. So we're going to make our bottom lashes a little shorter. And again, coming from the ridge of the eye. So this right here on the skin of the eye. And I don't want them to be too thick, but we don't want them too thin either. Same thing here, we got the curve, so we got to put that a different little curve to the eyelashes as they go to towards the inside of the eye. Now again, they get a little thinner and a little shorter as they get closer towards the tear duct. Okay. And if you want, you can add just a very light shadowing. I don't want to do it real because I don't want to smudge those eyelashes, but I also want that shadowing. I should have done that before I did the eyelashes, but that's okay. But I still want a little bit of shadow underneath because that's where the eyeball actually will come in on the bottom of the eye here. So we got that little fold there. And that is our realistic eye. And we're done.